McMullen McDonald. Mac here with Young Birds 365. And you know, on Monday mornings, we get Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports up and involved. Jeff Kerr, were you listening to WIP? You're on that borderline range. You can get it anytime you want with the Odyssey app. But did you just happen to be tuned on Friday when A.J. Brown decided to make a appearance on the Eagles flagship radio station?
Oh, I didn't miss it. So I was on my run when he called in, and I'm sending a text to Jack Fritz. I'm like, oh, here we go. And yeah, that was probably one of the more entertaining 20 minutes of radio I've heard in a long time.
So what'd you think? We'll give you the floor. Jody and I have explained our sort of thoughts about it. What did Jeff Kerr think?
I'm always in the camp. Don't say anything. I'm always in that camp. I don't think you gain anything by saying anything. He got exactly what he wanted, in my opinion. People saying how wonderful he is and how he stuck it to the man and this and that. I think he did give some points in there, but man, just ignore things. You know, that's just me. That's just how I handle things. I get AJ's a different person. You know, I believe pretty much everything he said. You know, I think he's being honest with people, which is good, but I just don't think ultimately you gain anything by doing something like that.
Yeah, see, I disagree with you. When you're having a live conversation with someone, that's different than responding to a tweet. That's different than typing out a response. No, you're going back and forth with someone. You're saying something to them, and then they can respond with you. That's different. If you want to tell me A.J. Brown should get the hell off social media for the rest of his life, I'll probably agree with you because that doesn't get you anywhere. But when you're having a live conversation with somebody, when you guys are in a locker room and you're talking face to face to him after the game, that's a different story. That's different than just getting caught up in social media haze. I think he did accomplish some things, and I just said that in the last segment. Most important thing is he got on the record and said, I want to be here. I want to be a Philadelphia Eagle. I'm very happy here in Philadelphia. Just that alone makes everything else worth doing.
Well, I never thought he was unhappy. That's the thing. I don't know where that came about. Like, he wasn't happy in Philadelphia or the whole – I mean, look, I get why he would be upset at things. If you're hearing some of the stuff he probably heard over the past week, and some of it was fan-generated, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I don't blame the guy one bit for standing up for himself. Again,
there's never been any evidence that AJ didn't want out, that AJ wants out of Philadelphia. I mean, that's already been reported, Jody, that he said he wants to be here. He's got no issues with Jalen Hurts. He's already explained in the past that when he gets upset on the sidelines, it's not that he necessarily wants targets. It's frustration over her. And by the way, he always wants the football. He admits that too. All good receivers want the football.
And he deserves to get the football.
And he thinks they have a better chance to win if he gets the football. But that's a big difference than what he said. All of this. Now, granted, WIP is a bigger platform than even the Inquirer, if you want to look at it from a print standpoint or old school media standpoint. It's a bigger platform, so maybe it gets through to more people. But nothing he said was new. Nothing he said was new other than coming forward with the frustration. So I don't know if it's good or bad, but just knowing AJ as much as I do, I would say stay away from
right.
it. But John, that's easier said than done. I freely admit that.
As you've told me a couple times, John, and you're dead on right about Jason Kelsey and retirement. You can change your mind.
Oh,
AJ Brown could change his mind.
Oh, yeah. And if he does, it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
If he wants to go on WIP and confirm himself, not through a writer, himself via the airways of WIP, that he wants to stay here in Philadelphia, that's news. It may be, in your estimation, old news. I don't think so. When you're doing it live on a broadcast outlet, not being transcribed to a writer, that's different. That's more important. I'm sorry, John, if you don't think that's the case.
I'm not saying it's not news. I'm saying nothing he said was new. It larger platform, yes.
It was just reaffirming stuff.
Yes. Yes. And Jeff knows that.
And you don't think
because
that was worth doing? He would be better off not picking up the phone and calling WIP.
I don't think it's worth doing because you're giving more gravitas, whatever word you want to use. Give me a better
And-
word. To people like Craig Carton and people like Kay Adams and whatever Spike said. I don't know what's.
Yeah, I have no idea what he said.
But you're giving more import to that than it deserves. So from that standpoint, that's the part I don't get, because you're acknowledging something that's, you know, Craig's is probably the worst because Craig just threw something out there and said, oh, make up your own rumor.
Right.
You know, and that's why I use the word. That's a troll, man. That's a troll. If you got something, say it.
I said on WIP that night with Rob Ellis, Craig Carton basically said, please watch my show that no one watches. That's all that was.
I mean, it was throwing something against the wall where you could make something up. And Howard brought it up. Howard Eskin has said, well, it could be Fletcher Cox. Fletcher Cox is probably leaving. So Craig can do his 180 and say, well, Fletcher Cox has left, you know, and it has nothing to do with what he said, but there's 30% turnover in the NFL. So you can feel very comfortable saying something's going to happen and something's going to happen and somebody's going to leave. So is that really meaningful? And you're giving it a little bit more. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's, if you want to talk about something specific, talk about something specific and say, so-and-so said this, and this is why it's not true, and they don't know, then I think it accomplishes a little bit more. But again, just knowing AJ as little as I do, he has struggled in the past with some of these issues. He's probably too sensitive to it. So I would recommend, as Lane Johnson, similar situation. People know from Philadelphia better than most places, and Brandon Brooks as well. You know, it's difficult, but try to steer away from it as best you can. And I know it's difficult, though, to say that. Jeff, your thoughts?
It is, especially if you do go on social media and you're hearing stuff about you. No one ever wants to hear bad things about.
Of course not.
And that's the reality of it. And look, I thought when AJ said he was going to take a break from all this, I thought that was very good for him. You know, just kind of clear your mind out. And then when the tweets from the Super Bowl came out, I actually I hate doing this type of reporting, but I had to ask a couple people that would be in the know. Like, is that him? No, it wasn't him. And he confirmed that wasn't him. Now,
I will say whoever it was has very similar thoughts to AJ Brown.
Yeah.
Because AJ,
I mean, it might have been someone speaking for him, but it wasn't him.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I don't know. And then I guess he got his account. I know when you don't tweet for 30 days, or if you actually deactivate your account for 30 days, you lose it under Elon's new policy. So he did lose it, but then I guess he found a way to get. I don't know what happened there. It's that's too much, you know, investigative reporting, I should say. But you know, it was
don't need to be doing investigative reporting on Twitter. Huh?
Yeah, that don't help Elon out. But I did think it was funny though when he did come out with the whole, "Oh, that's not me," but you know, I was kind of laughing about that when I'm like, okay, now
that's not me, but that's my exact thoughts, you know. So who ultimately, you know, I guess it doesn't matter. But yeah, that's one of my pet peeves is, you know, and we were talking about it. And even as we were talking about it and explaining, Jeff, the whole idea that Philadelphia media is one giant group.
We're not. It's not even close.
And we're trying to push AJ Brown or insert name from insert team. And we're trying to do this, and we're trying to undermine the Eagles or the Phillies or the Sixers or the Flyers. Mike Sealsey's going to be on the show. He gets a lot of it from Flyer fans.
Mike's got a good column that came out this morning about the whole WIP interview that I suggested.
Oh, I got to check that out. I'm glad you said that. I haven't checked it out yet. Mike's done. He did a great column on AJ before and some of the mental health issues in Tennessee. And he did a great column on Jalen Hurts recently. But yeah, I mean, boy, it frustrates me. Does it frustrate you, Jeff, that you're lumped in with everybody else?
Yeah, it sucks. Honestly, you know, because I know firsthand just from being with you, John, being at Kratz, you know, Martin Frank, there's a certain group that, you know, AJ Brown likes. You know, I don't know if I'm one of them or not, but I know he's read some of my stuff and he's told me he's appreciated some stuff, you know, on and off the record. But, you know, I'll just say this with AJ Brown, it's, you know, I don't like being lumped in with Craig Carlton. I don't, because I never talked to him. You know, I just say the fans versus media divide is so high right now. No matter what you tweet about these players, these coaches, anything, they want you to be the biggest rah-rah cheerleaders on the face of the earth. And I'm like, no, that's your job. Let me be objective and do mine.
I'll give you just one example, and I promise we're moving on from AJ Brown, and we want to ask about the new coaching staff and this week in the Combine. I took a call yesterday on WIP, and the caller said, you guys have to pick and choose your words carefully, because when you say what you say and it's negative, it has an effect on the players and the Eagles and the other fans. And so be careful what you say, because all I hear is 99.9% of what I hear on WIP is negativity. And I said, wait a minute, didn't you just say you have to pick and choose your words carefully? So you're telling me 999 out of 1,000 opinions voiced on WIP are negative. You couldn't be more wrong. So don't call in and put something on WIP, me, Glenn, who were on the air at the time, everybody else, and then say something as stupid as that. Yeah, you have to be very careful.
One thing I've learned about hypocrites, guys, they don't care that they're
hypocrites.
Yeah, they don't care.
I will defend fans on this. It's not just Philadelphia. It's not. It's every fan base. Look, I'm a big racing fan. Everything NASCAR does is the worst thing in the world, and they had a 3-wide finish yesterday, and they went from this is the worst race ever, this is the greatest race ever in literally 2 seconds. It was ridiculous. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I thought it was the worst race ever. You know, again, it's not just Eagles fans. You're not in this.
No, it's not. But because there is more passion, and I would say it's the entire Northeast, to be honest, not just Philadelphia, but New York and Boston and even down to DC, Baltimore. There's a lot of passion in the Northeast when it comes to professional sports. And that in turn creates an environment. The Eagles, I say oftentimes, the Eagles have the largest media contingency in the NFL. And it's been that way for years. And even bigger than New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, bigger cities, because there's so much interest, it fuels outlets wanting people to cover the team. So there is more of it. And maybe that creates more problems because you have different levels and all that kind of stuff, and people have access and people don't have access. And, you know, it becomes cloudy and murky. And I get that, but just don't put people in a group. Just don't do it, because it's incorrect.
And you know what's funny, John? They're the same people who don't want to be lumped together in the group, but they want to lump them.
Right, but they want to do everybody. Yeah, 99.9%. Jeff Kerr. Right after we got off the air on Friday, the Eagles announced the rest of their coaching staff. The major hires were already done. The positional coaches have now been all filled out. Some guys did get to keep their job. I actually thought that the 2 new coordinators would come in and have a bigger broom than they actually had, and there are some guys still in place. General analysis of the Eagle coaching staff, and we probably put too much influence and interest into quality control coaches. We do want to analyze every single person on the Eagle staff. It's the main guys who will move the needle more than anything else. But that's what we do here on Birds 365. Do the Eagles have as good a staff, a better staff than the one they've had the last couple of years since Nick Sirianni first came to town?
Well, I think they have a good staff. I like the new hires. I did like how they kept Aaron Moorhead, by the way. I was kind of hoping that would be the case, because I think the organization in general likes Aaron Moorhead. So I'm kind of glad he stuck around. But, I mean, defense, you had to change pretty much everything on the defensive side. But some guys got to stay. So I wasn't against that. That obviously some guys in new positions on the defensive side of the ball. But what the only question I need answered right now is, what happens with if this team gets off to a slow start next year, or even if they get off to a good start, can they finish it this time? Nick Sirianni is going to be under more pressure than probably any head coach in the league next year once the season starts, just because of.
Yeah, he's going to be at the top of all the betting odds for
Yep.
First coach fired and things like that. Maybe not number one, but certainly near the top of the list because of the way things have handled. But I got to tell you guys, I think it was a very good sign for Nick Sirianni when they announced the coaching staff. And there are more. I'm surprised.
Defensively, there are a lot of guys that were kept.
Oh my God! That the whole offense. Kellen Moore got two guys, Doug Nussmeier and Kyle Bolero, who's sort of an analytics guy.
And Doug's always been McKellen, so I think that was a package deal.
Yeah, everybody stayed loyal to Nick Sirianni. So I think that the narrative has shifted towards, we all thought Nick Sirianni was going to be on an island. Now Kellen Moore is going to be on an island and trying to fit in with Kevin Patullo and Jamal Singleton and Aaron Moorhead and Jason Michael and Jeff Stoutland and TJ Paganetti, all the guys who've been here. They kept the whole offensive staff except for the surgical insertion of Kellen Moore, Doug Nussmeier, and again, we'll throw Caballero in there. He got two guys. And now it makes sense. I had heard that Cliff Kingsbury was the original sort of, not that they wanted him, but when they started the process, he was kind of the top guy.
That's the guy they threw the dart at.
Yeah, that's the guy that, and they did the interview, and then it came out that he wanted a little bit too much autonomy. And I'm like, what do we thought? What is he? He doesn't want Stoutland? What? Because, they're keeping Stoutland. No, they kept everybody. So, we probably wanted a little bit more. So now I think that the question shifts to not what Nick Sirianni does, but how does Kellen Moore fit in with the entire group? I think it's a pretty big statement, and I think it's shifted things pretty dramatically, the way the Eagles handled this offensively. Defensively, Vic, brought in who we needed to bring in. And that was expected. Jeremiah Washburn being the most notable exception, but that's mainly Vic's people. Offensively, Kellen Moore, man, he got two guys, and everything else is fit in with Nick's guys. I think it's interesting.
Did you get the remember the Titans vibe when you saw the offensive coach's stance? That Kellen Moore's like, I run the offense, and Nick, as a part of my team strategy. Did you get that vibe?
I didn't get that vibe.
Yeah, I'm not even understanding the point you're trying to make, Jeff. Gotta, I guess, explain it better. And I watched Remember the Titans, but I'm not sure I know the.
This is the coach of me dissecting every.
I just think it was far. We all thought Doug was neutered. It was far more surgical, far more targeted when it came to the offensive side. And the majority of his key people are all back, with the exception of Brian Johnson and Alex Tanney. So they served as the scapegoats. And that tells you about the quarterback. They understand the quarterback went in a negative direction, and he's got to start going in a positive direction. And we'll see. But it's totally shifted the questions from my standpoint. Now I'm like, all right, now Kellen Moore's the outsider, not Nick. And now it's going to be, how is Kellen Moore going to handle being in the family? He had to go outside the family. Well, the family's still here. I thought the family was leaving. The family as a whole is still here. I think it's interesting.
He's now sitting at the other end of the table. Nick Sirianni's at one end of the table. Kellen Moore's at the other end of the table. And oh, by the way, there's more food on Kellen Moore's end of the table because he's calling plays. If it's an offensive table we're talking about, Kellen Moore's calling the play. Do you think Kellen Moore's not going to be able to do what he wants to do because they kept a lot of positional coaches that were here under Sirianni?
Well, it's not. It's understand Patullo's the passing game coordinator. Singleton's the assistant head coach. We know Jeff Stoutland and his role in the run game coordinator. It's more than just positional coaches. Yeah, I thought, other than Kevin Patullo, I thought originally, and I'm talking rewinding when they announced that they were going to move on from Brian Johnson. I thought the only guys who were going to come back were Kevin Patullo and potentially Jeff Stoutland, obviously, and potentially Jamal Singleton. I thought that would be it. I think everybody else would be blown out. That wasn't the case. It wasn't even close to being the case. You're talking about to use your family line, and he's got more food at the end. Well, I'll tell you who's more comfortable at the table, and that's Nick Sirianni. He's got more people to talk to. Kellen Moore's got to ingratiate himself. He's the brother-in-law. He's coming in. He's not with the family. And that to me is an interesting dynamic that I didn't think would be happening.
Here's how we answer this question. I think it's actually pretty darn simple. It's going to take some research, but when he moved from Dallas to Los Angeles, how many guys did Kellen Moore take with him? We know Nussmeier was one of them, but how many other ex-Cowboy coaches, guys that you knew specifically had a tie to Kellen Moore, ended up on the Chargers staff? Kellen Moore may just be one of these Doug Peterson type guys. As long as you're looking me in the eye, Howie Roseman, and telling me I get to call the plays, I'll make it work. You got to introduce me to all your coaches. We'll work together. We'll be fine. That's how Doug was when he took over. Howie, coaching staff, yeah, whatever you say, Howie.
Well, I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying it shifts. It shifts from the thought. I was thinking, and I wasn't the only one thinking, because people were asking Nick Sirianni essentially, all right, what are you going to do now? Now I think it has completely shifted towards, and remember, Nick said, we can't get rid of everything because we did a lot of stuff well, essentially. I'm paraphrasing. He said that at his press conference as well. I kind of, threw it away at the time, but no, now it's evident that it's going to be true. And I think it just, not that Kellen Moore can't succeed with it, but I thought it was going to be more like Vic Fangio. And that essentially, I thought Vic was going to be able to get his guys, maybe a couple, maybe he can't get certain guys he wants, and maybe you got to fill it out. And I thought Kellen was going to get his guys. Vic got his guys. Kellen, it was like, you got to fit in with the greater family. I think I wasn't expecting it, and I don't think a lot of people were expecting it.
I thought that would be a bigger story on who the new coaches would be than what actually was. It actually ended up being the second biggest story of that day, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
We got to keep that in mind.
No, because
by the way, I wanted to ask you guys this. So before I came on, Peter King, I read his final column. And he's in his 10 things I think he basically doesn't think the Eagles are going to be very good this year.
No, I saw that.
I didn't get down that far to his column.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He said, I don't have a good feeling about Philadelphia in 2024 was, I think, what he wrote. But if the Eagles return to whatever, it'll be on Jalen Hurts.
He basically wanted Jalen Hurts to just take the reins of this football team and say, you know what, this is my team. I'm going to lead it. That's pretty much my decoding of it.
Well, now, the Dolphins moved on from Xavier Howard. They have some cap issues. And Jalen Ramsey tweeted essentially that another guy tweeting, he'll never forgive a certain someone for not using Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard correctly. Are we, there's a lot of talk, mainly amongst the secondary, about Vic Fangio in Miami. And, as I have often said to Jody, they weren't blocking the door from Vic leaving. Nobody seemed to care. Here in Philadelphia, I think it's taken on this, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's almost like he's the savior and everybody accepts that it's going to get dramatically better. Do you see it that way, Jeff?
No. I'm still kind of bugged, and again, the whole fan thing. I'm going to go back to this. They hated John Buchanan. John Buchanan ran pretty much the same thing Vic Fangio is going to run. So Again, I just don't understand this organization sometimes. When we were at the press conference with Roseman and Nick, it looked like they were going to steer away from that type of defense. And then all of a sudden they realized they could get the actual architect of the defense, and they're like, okay, yeah. And I'm like, okay. I'm kind of looking at things this way. This defense cannot be as bad as they were last year. If he
That's
can get
true.
if he can get them middle of the pack, I think that's an accomplishment on his end. I'm just not crazy about how Vic Fangio. It's kind of phasing out in the league right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which might be a good thing because teams aren't preparing for it as often. And if Fangio shrinks into a smaller bit of the minority, it might actually be advantageous. But John, let me ask you, you say they think that Fangio, some people are considering Fangio a potential savior for the defense. Who are you referring to there?
Fans mainly.
Yeah, see, I don't agree with that. I think at best Fangio is getting a wait and see attitude. That people aren't jumping to the hey, now we got the guy. We've got.
Well, I think a lot of it sparked from Gannon. They hated Gannon to
exactly.
such a degree.
Well, they still don't like the Fangio defense, even if it's Fangio who's running it.
Remember, there was a lot of misinformation, whatever you want to call it, about how Jonathan left, and the assumption was, oh, Jonathan screwed up Vic Fangio, the greatest of all time. I think you have that group who thinks if it wasn't for Gannon, Fangio would have been here, which is true, but it's got more to do with timing than actual Jonathan Gannon. And everything would have been fine. Everything would not have been fine, even if Jonathan Gannon returns.
Agreed.
As people
with the Eagles fan base, yes.
Yes.
And I think fans would have been right in saying that the ones that had their doubts about Gannon with last year's defense, yeah, I think Gannon would have been in some significant trouble because the personnel on that defense was just.
Oh, yeah. The person, that doesn't matter if it was Gannon, Fangio, Desai, Patricia, that was going to be a bad defense because the personnel was that bad. Now, would it have been slightly better with Gannon or Fangio? Probably, but not great.
But what are we talking about?
In the NFL.
Yeah, exactly. What are we talking about? Ranking 20th to 25th instead of 30th to 32nd?
Exactly. But I think, yeah, Jody, I think there's a large group that think Vic Fangio is a savior. Not everybody, but I think there's a large group.
Large as in majority, as in more than the 50%.
Yeah, I would say more
base?
than half. More than half of the people that contact me. Yeah.
I vehemently disagree with that.
I've gotten people I think are more cautious than curious.
Yeah, that's more like it. I'll tell you who the president of the Vic Fangio Savior Fan Club is. Howie Roseman. He hired him. He spirited him away from Miami. He's the guy who wanted to get him back here.
Yeah,
if there is a president of the Vic Fangio Fan Club, it's Howie.
I know nobody's going to believe me. In 6 years from now, probably Albert Breer will come out and confirm it, and people will finally accept it. Howie Roseman doesn't hire coaches. He doesn't. He doesn't hire coaches.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't.
Howie / Jeff, if you want to make that distinction. Thank you.
Well, Jeff, no, I would say Jeff.
Who hired Vic Fangio? Sure as hell wasn't Nick Sirianni.
Nobody, literally, yeah. Nick has no problem with Vic Fangio being the defense coordinator. When it comes to head coach, coordinators, Jeffrey Lurie's buck stops with Jeffrey Lurie. When it comes to assistant coaches, yes, Nick Sirianni gets to hire his assistant coaches. I know nobody's going to believe it, but he gets to hire his assistant coaches. Now, Howie, when he doesn't have a guy in mind, it's Howie's job to gather candidates. And then it's Nick's job to interview the candidates and make the decision on who he wants on his staff. That's the way it has been. Now, Jeffrey stepped in. It's his team, as he has the right to do it. And it came to the coordinators, and he essentially mandated that they had to go in a different direction. But when it came to defensive coordinator, no, Nick loves Vic Fangio, and Nick would have wanted Vic Fangio anyway. He wanted Vic Fangio last year. Everybody in this organization is on board with Vic Fangio. Everybody. Nobody, Vic
Vic
Fangio is not being
Fangio was
forced
all
on
for
anybody.
coming here until he
Yeah.
couldn't come here.
Yeah. Everybody loves him in this organization, and that includes Nick Sirianni. Are they right? That I can't tell you.
Well, we'll find out over time.
There is one thing, though, I want to add with Vic Fangio. There's going to be a lot more accountability on that defense next year. It's not going to be communication issues.
They'll be better prepared. They'll be better prepared. By the way, Sean Desai got a job, guys.
I'm happy for him.
Hey, the one thing he knows for sure, doesn't have to go to the combine this week because the Rams don't go.
That's right, man. I'm sure they got some people
get
there.
Into HR, get all signed up, get your benefits in order, and don't have to worry about actually doing work this week. Because
did you guys hear the Les Snead comments about them having a first-round pick?
No,
this year, no. I've heard the
he said, "Well, we have a first-round pick right now."
Yeah, well, you know,
I love the Rams. I love what he does.
And I had two different individuals on my CBS show over the weekend, and both of them kind of defended the Rams for not showing up, which I still don't understand. But they did make a good point. The last 2 years, the Rams have actually drafted pretty well.
Very well.
Kyron Williams in the third round, and the second half of the year, he played as well as any back in the National Football League.
Great. Yeah.
Kobe Turner was another one.
Turner, third round
Puka.
finalist for.
How could you forget Puka?
And Puka. Oh, I was getting there, John. And Puka in the fifth round. That's pretty damn good. Despite the fact they don't show up at the combine, they've been hitting on late day 2, early day 3 picks. Guys stepping in and not only playing but starring for them. So even though I'm giving them grief,
you know, with Puka and Kyron Williams specifically, and I don't know about Kobe, people are so obsessed with speed in this industry, and if you can't run a 40 time for what you're supposed to run for your position, they just knock you down. Like
you're an afterthought.
Yeah, can he play football? I mean.
John, that's why I don't like the combine.
Yeah. Well, I think to be honest, and I don't know if Jody was going down this, but a lot of teams, not a lot, but less teams, some teams are starting not to show up. I do think the most important part of the combine by far, ask anybody, medical testing, by far. The stuff that you see on television, they already know that stuff. And if they're not going to know it, they're going to know it from the pro days. That's just validating what they have. But as a whole, they have, you know, look, you have to have a baseline level of speed. I'm not saying that to play in the NFL, but if you're a 4-4, you know, one guy versus 4-4-6 at receiver versus 4-5-3, Puka can't run. I covered the greatest receiver in NFL history that can't run, Chris Carter, who's in the Hall of Fame.
All he does is catch
couldn't run, played pretty well. Yeah, I don't get it. But anyway.
I will remember your stance here, John, which you should know by now I agree with, that when we're leading up to the draft and you go, yeah, but the measurables. That's what you're getting in Indianapolis this week.
I'm generally talking about teams. I mean, to say that teams ignore them is not true. So I'm generally talking about what teams think. And, you know, left tackle, for instance, got to have the arm length, right? If your arm length is underneath it, like Tyler Steen, who played left tackle his entire college career, well, he's got to move inside.
Right. And and I'll probably call you on the carpet about this again. You have to indicate, are you talking about what teams think or what John McMullen thinks? Because you're the guy who's making the statement, and sometimes I think you mean this is what the teams think.
Well,
and I'm wondering, is that what John McMullen thinks? You got to differentiate between the two.
I try to differentiate as much as possible. I said sometimes I fail. When I talk about measurables, I'm generally talking about what teams think, because that's
right. But you were just talking about measurables, as in the guy can't run, and you're saying, why do they do it this way? How can Puka Nacua fall to that far in the draft? Well, is that your opinion or is that the team's opinion?
Well, when you have somebody who's successful and plays, Now, if you can't, like Kyron Williams was a great back in college for
He
people
was
that
injured a
forget.
lot. He was injured a lot.
Yeah, but when he was out there, he was a great back. Now, when you can't run, and by the way, I put that in quotations because everybody in the NFL can run. To a normal person, I have to explain that as well. Puka Nacua is very fast. He's just not fast for an NFL wide receiver. So you have to have a baseline, number one. But like if he couldn't play in college or Kyron Williams couldn't play in college, well, it's probably a good indication they're not going to turn it on and play well in the NFL. But when you see somebody who's successful as they were, and we've talked about Puka with Britton Covey because Britton works out with him and they've been friends. Um, and I asked him, I think you were there, Jeff. I asked him.
I was right. I was right next to you.
Yeah. I did anything about Puka surprising. He's like, nope. This guy's just unbelievable football player. Yeah. And I've seen too many of those. They're always outliers. But if you're a really good football player, yeah, I think the film outweighs. Again, you have to hit a baseline when it comes to measurables, but I think the film outweighs measurables, and a lot of teams don't think that. A lot of teams don't think that.
I agree with you. The film is where you determine who the players are, and they do put too much.
That was one of the things I got upset about when the whole Brock Purdy craze was starting. I'm like, you guys act like this guy was never good. He was really good in college. He was a great college player. Oh, well, he didn't do this or he didn't take this. I said, no, he was a really good college player. I remember when they drafted him, his last pick, because about ready to wrap up today. I'm like, wait, he wasn't picked
well,
yet?
It brought Ryan. It's also Ryan Pauls had a great quote. He said, "I've got a lot of confidence in our ability to see talent on the field. The human being we've got to figure out." And I think that's a great quote because when guys miss on picks, especially first round picks, they're generally not missing on talent. They're missing on something else. They might not have something else. It might be work ethic. They might be, what's off the field. They might, they might have the desire, might not have the desire, but nobody's getting picked in the first round of this league by teams because they don't have gifts, physical gifts. They can figure that part out. What I liked about what Ryan said is, that the hard part is figuring out the human being.
There's a head on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And if you buy into what Ryan Pauls is saying, which I would, not showing up at the combine just makes no sense. If it's 5 minutes that you get a chance to interact with a player and learn something about it, I'm not saying you make the call, yay, nay, thumbs up, thumbs down, first or second round pick on a player because of those 5. I'd rather have those 5 minutes with the player than not have those 5 minutes. That's why I think it's ridiculous for any of these teams who say, we don't have to go to.
Well, they would say pro days, top 30 visits. They get the time.
Right.
But on your
pro day, you might act differently than you do at the combine. I'd like both. Thank you very much. I'm not saying go to the combine, blow up full of pro days. No, do both. Why wouldn't you do both?
Well, you should do both.
I'm with you.
What else do you have to do?
General manager's going to be doing this week.
What else do you have to do?
Sitting at their desk at their home stadiums rather than being in Indianapolis around the players.
I'm with you.
Idiotic. It's idiotic.
Yeah. I'm it was for years the NFL. I've said the NFL should have full-time officials, and they would say, "No, we have nothing for them to do." What do you mean you have nothing for them?
There's always something for them.
Yeah, have them in the office, watching film, watching games, watching mistakes, watching. You can always find something to do. So yeah, I'm with you. It's your job. You might as well go. But I think other than the medical testing, I don't think the combine isn't as important to fans as to NFL teams as fans realize.
Maybe it's the cost of that expense.
I feel like
to put them
20 years ago when they first started airing the combine, I know at least in my generation, we thought it was, okay, we actually get to see this now. We heard about it, now we get to see it. Now it's kind of played its course.
Yeah.
They've played its course for maybe viewing, but it shouldn't play its course for teams that they.
Well, no. I'm just talking about
next. You're going to tell me they're going to cancel the combine because you can get all the information. I didn't say move. I said cancel. You're telling me the combine is ended its value?
No, the combine is the ultimate networking. That's what it is.
Not if you're home in your office. If you ain't there, you can't be networking with anybody.
By the way, that is I said, of the actual combine activities, the medical testing is the most important by far. Of the actual weekend, the more important aspect is we always talk about that term legal tampering. Doesn't really exist.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't really exist. The NFL calls March 11th this year legal negotiation period. The actual legal tampering period is in Indianapolis. That's when
for some players it might even be before that.
Yeah.
And there's a certain running back on the Giants that has probably already gotten into that.
And several teams didn't think enough of the combine to actually send their general manager.
Well, they don't have money to sign any of these players.
The cap just went up on Friday, an extra 30 million. What do you mean you don't have the money?
How's that going to help? How's that going to help the New Orleans Saints get under the cap?
The Saints did that to themselves. Jeff Kerr, we got to kill you right now. Saints killed themselves. We got to kill you.
We kept you long. Thanks, Jeff.
We will be inviting you back, as always, for next Monday. It'll be pretty much combine wrap-up by the time we get there. Looking forward to doing with you again next week. Thanks for doing it this morning, JK.
Yeah, no problem. By the way, Jody, going to Vegas next week. What should I bet?
Vegas?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you.
Want a future?
I'll tell you the one future bet I made this week. Sorry, Birds fans. It's a baseball bet because baseball's coming up. This year's World Series participants: Philadelphia Phillies, Texas Rangers. Rangers are like the fourth choice in the American League.
Why?
Astros, Yankees, Orioles, Rangers. And they're the defending champions.
The Rangers just beat two of those teams last year.
Yeah, they did, but they're the Vegas fourth choice as of right now in the American League, and the Phillies are the third choice in the National League. So even though you got two teams who were in the Final Four of baseball last year, they're not thought of as highly coming into this year. I got a pretty good price at the Rangers-Phillies World Series. So if you want to jump on board,
I always say the Rays are always a good future bet, even if they don't make it.
I never bet the Rays. I always lose money on the Rays. I always think they're going below 500, and they never do. I give them credit.
No, they always win 9 games.
They poke me in the eye every single year. Rangers, Phillies World Series this year. Jeff Kerr, thanks, buddy.
Anytime, Jerry John.
Read him on CBSSports.com. Now, National NFL. Now, Jeff's another one, kind of like me and McMullen, who try and walk that fine line as a member of, quote unquote, the Philadelphia media. Jeff doesn't write for Philadelphia Outlet, he writes for CBSSports.com. But he is at 90% of the Eagles games and at practices and in the locker room thereafter. So he's not really a national guy, even though he writes for a national outlet. He tries to thread that needle the same way John and I do. We're local here on Birds 365. I'm local on WIP. John's local here on Birds 365. But he writes a national column for CBS. So some of us have to try and be a little bit more careful that the way we put our opinions and disseminate our information out there. This show itself tries to do both. We know that the majority of the people, Daz and Twitzig and Future of Man and Clip Toe Eagles, 90% of them probably live here in the Delaware Valley, like John and I do. But we get guys checking in from South Carolina and then trolls from San Francisco and everything. So it's kind of a combo national local thing we got going here. We'll continue it next here on Birds 365. Mike Sealski going to join us coming up in about 10 minutes. And oh, by the way, let me do you guys a favor. Whether you're here in the Delaware Valley or not, you can still take advantage. It might be a little easier if you're here in the Delaware Valley. Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you need to do. Call one of the two managing general partners, Jim or Fran, and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
Go to get your game